Welcome, boys and girls. Costin here with a discussion about the AI in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires following the release of patch 8.1, where Creative Assembly has mentioned that they've changed the campaign AI prioritization, and they've also looked to fix some of the bigger issues that do end up occurring during the course of a campaign, like the AI sitting with multiple armies, just being passive, not really fully utilizing them. Also, not really building a proper empire. Now, in this case, with the factions that I have near me, so be it Forik, be it Warzag, be it Rapans, I have vassalized them. So they're not really a good indicator of how the AI handles its empires. For what it is worth, if we look at Krokgar, who I've only recently vassalized, he did take the jungles of the gods, he did take the kingdom of the beasts, and he's actually held off Warzag because I did declare war on him through Warzag. In fact, I took the Golden Tower in order to vassalize Warzag, sell it to Warzag. But let's take a look at the rest of the campaign map and see how things have developed. So in the south, we do still have the usual situation with Axiatl, where he does have multiple armies just sitting around in his initial province. Though, to be fair, he does have armies all over the place, and he's basically beaten Kairos Fateweaver, which is one of the more reasonable outcomes. Usually one of them ends up being dominant over here, and they don't necessarily fight for a very long time. In fact, I'm actually quite surprised that Axiatl ended up at the top of the game, so to speak. Aislinn has not really done anything, so sometimes he goes on a trip. In this case, he did take the Pox March, so he did send an army over there, but so far he hasn't really been doing all that much over there. And he does have multiple armies in his initial settlement. So, the AI is still not really good when it comes to naval invasions, you know, traversing armies across the sea and using that. And with Aislinn, it's always a situation because of his unique mechanics, where it's really the portals that he has that make things work for him if you're playing him, but not so much for the AI. If we look at Cathay, we do have a fairly major war, and I'm actually quite surprised to some extent as to how things have unfolded over here. So Lokir has been pretty much on a rampage against the various factions he's arrayed. You do have Sinnelleos sitting around with multiple armies in his initial settlements, but I think there's been quite a bit of back and forth over here between Cathay and him. Then we have Village. He's taken the Great Bastion, so Miao Ying's AI is not really good in terms of being able to handle the Great Bastion situation, because it's another faction and she's not really going to do a great job defending them, though she might confederate them, which is how I imagine she got the Turtle Gate. But yeah, she's on the back foot over here, though we do have the Dolgan coming over here from the north, invading Cathay and actually taking a decent amount of territory right here in Cathay under Sail, the Faithless, who just has a couple of units, but he has beaten Zaytan, and it's kind of interesting to see how Bashiva has been handling things ever since she's been added into the game, because I expected that either Grimgor is going to be Grimgor in a campaign, or Bashiva, taking advantage of the fact that Grimgor ends up in a war with Tamarkan or with Kolek, or both really, she would end up becoming dominant. In this case, she has become dominant. She's taken multiple provinces, and she seems to be marching north even, like she's at war with what remains of Kolek, who apparently actually has his vassal working, at least to some extent. I mean, yeah, Kolek did defeat Tamarkan in this particular campaign, and now he's up against Bashiva. Honestly, looking at the kind of situation that you have over here between Bashiva and Kolek, I would probably put my money on Bashiva. She just has more armies than him. Astrogov, not necessarily anything all that special. Forgrim, he's taken... he's done a pretty good job dealing with the Crooked Moon, surviving the situation, and now I personally have Scrag to deal with. Like, Scrag, yeah, nothing special. Like, he still takes his initial provinces, and then he ends up being a rather big problem for quite a few people. You do have the continuous war, as it were, between Clan Engerund and the Skaven right here, which does tend to occur a lot of the times. Like, if we look at Belagar, more often than not in his campaign, he kind of ends up just struggling to do anything really worthwhile in his particular situation. Though sometimes he does defeat Scrag and wipe him out and take control of territory that's not particularly useful to him. Then we have the Empire being the Empire. So Karl Franz and Elspeth have essentially wiped out Vlad right here in this campaign. Multiple armies, good amount of territory right here. Sure, it's only really Reichland and Midland that Karl has, but Elspeth does have control of Sylvania. I imagine that's going to change when they do add Undead Wasteland as a climate, and that's probably going to affect Empire campaigns quite a bit, especially with Sylvania, if that becomes Undead Wasteland as a climate. Azak, yeah, he's taken pretty much control of a good portion of the Ostermark and half of Talabayam. Festus is still alive. I think one of the things that I'm actually surprised, I know it's only turned 40, and for some people who played the game, it's like, oh, the campaign only really starts later on, but this is on Legendary very hard, and on these kind of difficulties, a lot of these minor factions or factions that don't necessarily hold a lot of territory can end up being wiped out. I don't necessarily think Festus has long for this world, but the fact that he's still alive, as well as several other factions are still alive, is pretty interesting. I mean, for instance, Malachi is fighting off all of Norska, Azazel, Chaos factions. I'm not quite sure how I have vision with him. I've seen it happen before with Tomb Kings. Not quite sure what's up with that. Might be the rogue armies that are available for them. But yeah, I'm not sure how I got vision with Malachi. Might be some weird thing with vassalization or something along those lines. But yeah, he's been doing pretty well. Kislev, not so much. Kislev's been conquered by the Skaven, so we can see that there's Skaven corruption, and Katrin is soon to be wiped out. Boris Ursus has been wiped out. Archeon has taken that territory, though he hasn't necessarily done all that much. Which does bring the question, it's like, yes, Archeon is going to be the endgame crisis, but how effective is he going to be in his campaign? Because he does have this tendency, it's like, okay, I went against Boris Ursus, and then he just kind of ends up doing not a whole bunch of things in his campaign. The Demon Prince has taken out Malice Darkblade, and then we have my favorite Sigvald. Like, Sigvald and Valkia surprisingly tend to be two of the more effective Warriors of Chaos factions. Like, they end up taking a good amount of territory, but yeah, you still see this situation with multiple armies just sitting around the territory. Do I even have vision with her? I'm not sure I do. Oh, I do. She's at war with Nagarev. So she's at war with Alifanar, though Alifanar has a pretty good strong point. So right now it's kind of just in a static situation. But like, Grumbrindle's still alive. So is Malekith. And that, again, is kind of like unusual, because a lot of the times by turn 40, you end up seeing a lot of these factions. Like, Grumbrindle is a really good case of a situation where his faction does end up being on the back foot against Malekith, just because Dark Elves recruit a lot of armies and they have a much better economy, and the dynamics of the terrain over here do end up favoring Malekith more often enough. Kadept hasn't really done anything. Mazdamundi, yeah, he's taken out his initial factions, and he's gone to war against Morathi for whatever interesting reason right there. But yeah, it seems Mazdamundi is doing quite okay. Noctilus is doing phenomenally well for his situation. Like, Alariel has been wiped out. Tyrion and Elfarion are holding the fort, and you know what? In 20 turns or so, I would actually suspect that they would win. Yeah, Lord Scroll still holding a bit of territory, but again, on the back foot, there's still some Skaven available over here, but they're probably not going to survive against the Order Tide. If we look at the mask, she's basically down to her last territory, which, yeah, surprising. It's an island territory, so you need to do a naval invasion over there. And I think if that wasn't the case, she would have been wiped out at this point. So some factions have proven to be quite durable right here. Mogr is gone, though, so maybe Wood Elves have been more aggressive. If we consider Bretonnia as well, looking at the situation in Bretonnia, more often than not with Grom, though it might be a question of some of the building slots they've given in Massive Oracle to make it a more useful territory, though you still have that growth problem. But with Grom the Paunch, he's actually proven to be quite resistant to the Bretonnians. Many times when I play a campaign, the Fey Enchantress, or just Bretonnia in general as a whole, ends up wiping out and sweeping the board over here by this point in the campaign. Marienburg's still alive, so Kemmler hasn't necessarily done the best job, though his provincial capital is still alive. But yeah, I've definitely seen some things in this campaign. If we look at this map, we see certain things that would usually not happen. Whether or not it's just a case of faction randomization working out in a specific way, or whether or not the actual changes of campaign AI prioritization have ended up benefiting these factions, it's hard to say. I think in some cases we do see factions just not really fully utilizing their resources. For instance, once I vassalized Forek, he actually kept his main army over here in Carrickzorn and didn't really do anything, whereas I had hoped he would go after Scarbrand, so I ended up having to deal with that, which is not necessarily the most fun idea. And then another situation that did occur over here is Warzag ended up laying siege to this capital, to the Lizardmen right here in the southern jungles for quite a few turns. So is that situation where they had an army in a port settlement, so they escaped, and that messes with AI in quite a substantial fashion. So I think there's improvements to be done, especially in terms of the AI using their resources and really building up massive empires. Because right now, the way things work, by the time the AI can build a really solid empire, the campaign is kind of over. And the problem that can occur is that you end up with certain progression on certain sections of the campaign map, and then you end up with static front lines for quite a few turns where the AI doesn't do anything, and then you just come in from another section of the campaign map with multiple armies and you just sweep the board. Of course, endgame crises, especially at Chaos 1 or Nagash, are going to change that quite around, especially if we can play with both of them at the same time. So it's really going to be a question of how that is going to play out once they add those endgame crises into the game. That's all I had to say. Costin signing out. Stay tuned for more.